Awesome, thank you. Hello and welcome to the February 28th, 2024 meeting of the First and Middle Housing Council. I'm Carolyn Cox, Lacey's representative to this group and the soon-to-be outgoing chair of the group. I'd like to, we do have some couple of new faces here today, but I'd like to just start with introductions. Let's start with the screen with Joan, Kathy, and then we'll do jurisdictions after that.
Could you say that again, Carolyn?
If you could just do a quick introduction of who you are and who you represent.
You wanted me to introduce myself?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm Joan Cathy from the city of Tumwater, and Michael Althauser will not be able to attend today. And I'm here with Brad Medrud, our planning director.
Right. So Joan will be a voting member today. Yay. We have two county commissioners, I believe, attending. Carolina and Emily.
Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner, and I am the alternate.
Okay. Emily.
Emily Klaus, Thurston County Commissioner for District 5.
Right.
Right. And why don't we go ahead and catch the rest of the county staff while we're there. We've got
Tom Webster, Senior Program Manager with Thurston County.
and
Oh, Kaylee Marino, Thurston County Homeless Response Program Manager. That's who I am.
Leah Tanchman, Affordable Housing Program Assistant.
Okay, and
Alex Purse, Affordable Housing Program Manager for the county. Lisa Sparkman, Communication Specialist for the county and to the RHC.
thank you. Okay, who else? We've got two young peoples on there. Trevor,
Hi, Trevor Palmer, City of Yelm.
you want to introduce your companion there?
Absolutely. We got Gary Cooper. He's one of our planners and does some good things for us.
Great, thank you. Welcome to both of you. And now we'll go around the table. Let's go with Olympia and then we'll do Lacey.
Hi, Danny Madrone at the City of Olympia City Council.
And you have with you
Rich White and Darian Lightfoot. And then Robert Vanderpool is the alternate to the Regional Housing Council.
Great, welcome. Right, and with City of Lacey, I'd like to introduce our new alternate member from the Lacey City Council, Nick Dunning.
I know I'm replacing the mayor, so hopefully I can live up to his shoes. But I appreciate it. I'm really, this is one of the councils I was really looking forward to, or really interested in. So I'm really happy to be here, and I have to miss the second half of it because there was another previously scheduled event too. But I wanted to make sure I was here and introduce myself, and looking forward to working with everybody.
And he had been given the wrong date, so he just found out last night that this was happening. All right, and we have Brian Andrews, our planning manager.
Yep.
And you want to introduce?
Yeah, Jennifer Adams, Social Coordinator.
And I think that's it.
Advisory Board chairs.
Oh, yes, we do. Okay, let's go with Homeless Services Advisory Board.
Hi, I'm Tammy Smith. I'm the chair of the Homeless Services Advisory Board.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Caven Hill, co-chair of the Homeless Services Advisory Board.
Okay, and Affordable Housing.
I'm Grace Lee, and I'm the co-chair for the Affordable Housing Advisory Board.
Okay. Let's see, we have Tracy Carlos on board too. Tracy, you're here in a supporting role, or what are you?
Yeah, I'm here as Commissioner Klaus's assistant, just to take notes and stuff.
Okay. Well, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anybody we've missed? You want to introduce yourself?
Karen Hall, Director of Housing, South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity.
Welcome, Karen. All right. We're all here. Great. All righty. Could We have a motion to approve the agenda. Okay. I'd like to propose one change. The agenda date at the top has 2023 and it should be 2024. And the same thing at the bottom of the agenda for upcoming meetings should say 2024. So if will you accept my friendly amendment to your motion?
Move to approve as amended.
All right. Here a second?
You can get on trying to.
Are you trying to second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second that.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Maker of motions and seconder of motions. It's only his second meeting. But it's awesome. All right. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our January 2024 meeting?
Have at it, Trevor.
I move to approve the minutes from the January 2024 meeting.
Okay, I'll second. Are there any comments on the minutes? All right, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
They are not listed in the attendees.
Did you wish to make any public comment? Okay, thank you. All right.
In the background. If they do show up later, is there a point in which they can talk to you, or is this? the
Yeah, if you just let us know if they show up, we'll try. and work
It's
them
a
in.
person named Lisa Stridler.
Lisa Stridler?
Stridinger.
Stridinger, okay.
Lisa Stridinger.
All right. So let's move to Grace Lee with Affordable Housing Advisory Board recommendation of new members.
Yes, hello. So, let's see. So, in November, the executive leadership of both boards met to discuss advisory board recruitment process. And so we put together a volunteer subcommittee to go over all of the applications received. The applications were made available on January 17th and closed the application process January 31st. The board subcommittee prioritized applicants who have lived experience of homelessness or housing instability, were overrepresented in the homeless service systems, or had a background in real estate, were knowledgeable about affordable home ownership, or were knowledgeable about affordable housing lending. 12 applicants applied and the subcommittee chose 6 to interview. Of those 6, 3 applicants are now being recommended for placement on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. The candidates being recommended are Karen Hall, Jamie Military, and Tonya Hanen. Karen is a resident of Tumwater and currently works as Director of Housing for the South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity branch. Jamie is an Olympia resident who is the owner and operator of Piece by Piece Logistics, a moving company which has assisted many low-income households moving from housing situations which are no longer affordable or sustainable. And Tonya resides in unincorporated Thurston County and is a real estate broker and housing advocate.
Thank you. Are there any comments about our slate? And if you are comfortable, perhaps we can appoint them all and by acclaim in one motion. Well, I want to thank the committee, Grace, for your hard work. I know it's not easy doing interviews for applicants, and sometimes painful decisions have to be made when there's more good candidates than there are spots. So I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any comment? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the slated candidates.
I'll second that. Then, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving our 3 new members to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Okay. So welcome. Congratulations. Whichever is applicable. So thank you for stepping up for this important work. All right, and then Keely, you want to tell us about the Services Advisory Board and where that is?
Absolutely. So the same process. It was a joint process, so I won't repeat what Grace has already offered around how we went about recruiting and the timeline and that sort of thing. So we for the Homeless Services Advisory Board, likewise, we prioritized applicants that have lived experience of homelessness, that our frontline staff who are represent marginalized identities that are overrepresented in the homeless crisis response system. And we had 6 applicants. Of those 6, we interviewed 3. And today we want to bring before you 2 candidates for acceptance. One is Terry Cochran Frederick, and the other is Casper Cramblett. Terry lives in an unincorporated Thurston County, has lived experience and is a peer. So that's her subject matter expertise, is around being a peer, providing peer advocacy and peer work. And then Casper has lived experience also and currently works in Lacey at the Low Income Housing Institute at Maple Court, not Alliance, that's a mistake, so Institute. And also has subject matter expertise in shelter operations and peer advocacy and behavioral health services, which is a category that we were hoping to fill. So today we would love to have you accept these 2 candidates to the advisory board.
Righty. Just a question for you. I was approached by somebody who's interested in serving on one of these. And I wasn't sure when the next opportunity to apply would be, or if sounds like there's at least one opening on this board.
Yes.
So what is that process?
That's a very good question. We started having that conversation at the Homeless Services Advisory Board. We have a conversation. There's a conversation to be had between the 2 advisory boards about next steps. And it could be sooner than later. So we will get the word out as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And if I can just kind of add and ask a question, I believe they're still on the Homeless Services Advisory Board looking for a Tumwater representative.
Correct.
So that would remain open if someone from representing Tumwater would apply. So that's one opening that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. All right. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve the proposed solutions for these new appointments.
Motion by Emily. Your second?
Second.
In unison, thank you. All righty, any discussion? Gary? Okay.
Krista's on her way, so I was gonna say that we might need to meet her. She went to the atrium.
Oh, okay. We always lose somebody. Change.
Hey.
Good timing. Hey, Chris. All right. We're just about to vote on the motion to approve the new members to the Homeless Services Advisory Board. All in favor of accepting these 2 new members, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
If I can just jump in, the next step is we will take these to the Board of County Commissioners for formal approval And so that will happen in mid-March. And so they'll be appointed in time for the March meeting.
Okay, great. And I want to welcome Krista Linton from the City of Olympia to our meeting. And I think you know almost everybody, except you maybe don't know Nick Dunning, who is from the Lacey City Council and our new alternate to this group. So he's replacing Andy Ryder. All righty. Gosh, do you need a breath? We're about to go into fair housing.
But I can start whenever.
Okay, well, we're there on the agenda, so if you need to take a breath, do
Thank
so.
you.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I do have a very quick PowerPoint with a couple slides, so I'll just. Yeah.
You just let me know what the next slide.
Okay.
Here's the present button. Oh, it's not following the screen. Hold on. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. That was fine. I can start talking about it if you'd like while we get the screen share going. So I'm here to give an update just on the assessment of fair housing work. And if you aren't already familiar, the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing based on protected classes. So those include race, color, religion, national origin, disability, sex and sexual orientation, and family status. And so how this interplays with the work we do is jurisdictions who receive federal funding are required to do fair housing planning. And basically that's to ensure that the funding that they are putting in the community and the work that they're doing does not, whether it's intentional or unintentional, contribute to segregation and further discrimination.
Okay. Krista, can I stop you just for a second? I want to check in with people who are attending remotely. Are you all able to hear Krista okay?
Yes, you're just fine.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
There's a microphone right there, so.
Okay. So as part of our consolidated plan update, which was completed to direct the funding of our countywide and citywide for City of Olympia community development block grant funds, we did a process to do an assessment of fair housing as part of that. So it follows the cycle for the consolidated plan. So that's from 2023 to 2027. And so right now, we're in sort of a limbo period with HUD where they have proposed a new rule. And so that rulemaking process is underway right now. What we know about the proposed rule is that it is going to be much more stringent in terms of what jurisdictions are required to demonstrate in these assessments. And so we're ahead of the curve in that we're trying to already report annually, make progress on our plan, but it won't be until our next cycle that those requirements will be in place. So every year we'll have to report on our progress, and HUD will decide whether or not they accept our plan or not. And so we're just preparing ourselves for a greater level of accountability and transparency. That's really the idea behind this new rule. So there aren't any specific outcomes at this point, but we are trying to be prepared for those future cycles. So you can go ahead to the next slide there. Okay, so the tech team met on February 8th, and we just reviewed some of the goals that were created through the assessment of fair housing. And we looked at some things that we felt like were already underway in some of our work plans, where jurisdictions are already making progress. And then we looked at work that we could undertake together in the next year, specifically around the work we do through the RHC. And so a couple of those items are highlighted here, some areas that we wanted to bring to the RHC specifically. So, you know, we all know that development of affordable housing is really key to addressing gaps in housing needs for some of our most marginalized community members. So people of color, people with disabilities, people who are single parents, people who are transgender, they all face much higher rates of housing cost burden and homelessness. And so part of what we heard through the assessment of fair housing and what we've heard through our affordable housing partners is that it would be helpful to have a more streamlined place where developers could locate incentives for affordable housing. So for each city, those might be a little bit different. And so the tech team discussed doing an inventory of each jurisdiction's current incentives for affordable housing, and then match those up and see where there might be gaps or where there might be opportunities for us to align across jurisdictions. And so one suggestion was maybe having those in one place, like having the RHC webpage have space for that to list out different affordable housing incentives so that it would be easy for a developer to look at those incentives and find what exists across jurisdictions or what's specific to each jurisdiction. And then with input from the RHC, the jurisdictions could all decide whether or not they want to adopt some incentives from other jurisdictions to match policies. And we also heard concerns from fair housing survey participants about the conditions in their housing units, especially the impacts of mold on the health of especially folks with disabilities. So we have a great subject matter expert in Elisa Sparkman, who's willing to prepare a presentation to the RHC on best practices and some sample code language that we could adopt in the jurisdictions or at the county level. And so the last one is similar to that first one, inventorying each jurisdiction's tenant protections to identify any gaps or areas for us to align. And so staff proposes that we prepare a presentation for the RHC to go over that inventory of tenant protections in the jurisdictions, and then decide, each jurisdiction could decide if they want to try to match up or implement anything further. And so we have just some rough timelines associated here that we're proposing for each of these items, but I think depending on the schedule of the RHC, those can be adapted. So I'm happy to answer any questions or just any thoughts that people have about just this proposed plan for the next, almost that takes us into early next year.
Questions? Seth?
I'll just add, kind of jump in kind of towards the end. So as the tech team, we talked about wanting to incorporate these three items into the RHC work plan. And so you passed last November, October, you passed the work plan for this year. So these three items we'd be looking to incorporate into the work plan for the next year. So that's the intent. We wanted to stagger them, can't do all three at the same time. They're all important, but just to manage workload, the idea was to stagger them over the next 12 months or so.
Thank you, Tom. All right. Any other questions? All righty. Well, next step will be what?
So I think the next step is we're just looking for your feedback, approval to move. These are things that you want us to work on. And so with that, we would take and then kind of incorporate these into the work plan. If you wanted to change the order, if you have any comments, but the idea would, in a sense, looking for your approval tonight to add these to our work plan. And we would move forward on implementing them.
I have a question. So I assume you've looked at your work plan for the year, or the RHC work plan, and looked for where there was a little bit of room to add these things in.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and also we were intentional in thinking that some of these items are probably not a standalone meeting, that it may take 2 or 3 meetings of discussion. We present something and then there's some discussion and it kind of leads into the next topic of policy. You know, what do jurisdictions want to take back? What's kind of the next step? So we envision that some of these, you know, could be a 2 or 3 month kind of meeting topic for the RHC, that there'll be an initial presentation, but then, okay, what do we want to do with this information? What's the next step? What are the opportunities to bring greater consistency between jurisdictions, or kind of alignment between jurisdictions, policies, or incentives?
Yeah, all this sounds great to me. And I mean, you mentioned the policy component. It seems like this kind of has some tie into our next agenda item, where we'll maybe get a little bit deeper into that part of it. Is that the hope for the agenda today?
Well, it was certainly rolling.
Okay.
And, unfortunately, Michael Althauser, who's kind of the godfather of this idea about policy sharing and policy alignment among the jurisdictions, can't be with us today. I have a couple of notes that he sent along, but
okay,
you're exactly right.
Yeah,
they pair pretty well together.
Yeah, I think these are really important topics to bring forward, and I look forward to learning from other jurisdictions. I think this is a really good forum for us to be, you know, sharing stuff like this.
All right, so do I hear consensus with thumbs up or an eye here for this is the way we want to go?
Yeah, I just want to add to, just like with staff time and finding consensus over all jurisdictions, it's going to be like a pretty big lift to come here and offer a good discussion. And if we feel like this strategy or this process is going to have momentum and be impactful, and that's what we want to do, or if we think that this isn't, you know, because it is a veer off of our typical funding cycles and what we've done typically in the RHC. So if this feels like it's digestible and makes sense, then we're really excited to do it. Or if we feel like this format or if this process isn't it, then we want to pivot. But just what we feel electives will be, it'll be just like the best process for everyone to go back to the jurisdiction and be effective. This is what we thought that would be.
Did I hear any feedback from those attending remotely to what she was just saying? Nobody? Okay. Anybody in the room? Feedback to that?
Emily unmuted.
Oh, Emily?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't have any feedback, just thank you for the hard work. I appreciate everything that you all have done to work on this.
Okay. Anybody in the room? Okay, well, it looks like we're comfortable going forward in this direction. So thank you for your work on this. And we'll see. And it doesn't look like any of them are more time sensitive than the others. They all seem to be equally urgent.
I think it's just, sorry to interrupt. So we intentionally put the tenant protections last because there was a discussion around wanting, especially Olympia, just kind of doing the rental registry and some of the things of wanting to kind of wait a little bit and kind of see how that goes. So rather than having, so that was an intentional to do the tenant protections last, just so there's a little bit more sense of kind of see how that's going.
Yeah, lessons learned and
terms of what jurisdictions are doing.
Great.
Right. So I've requested that we come up with this next item because we had a pretty thin agenda for today to talk about how we can collectively work on policy, both in perhaps originating some ideas that could be worked on, or being kind of a clearinghouse of, you know, take an assessment of, you know, what is Tumwater doing about low-income housing? What is Olympia doing about this, that, and the other? And sharing those policies so that we're not all trying to reinvent the wheel. And in cases where there are some policy issues that may go across jurisdictions, how we can align them so that people we do business with don't have to come up, you know, work with three different sets of rules. So it just makes sense to us. And it was one of those things that we had very much at the forefront when we created the Regional Housing Council, but then it just got quickly sidelined with all the work. Well, I mean, it just seems like there was one urgent situation after another, and it just hasn't taken wing yet. So I'd like to get the conversational ball rolling and kind of hear your thoughts on where we might go with this. And I'll look for Michael's input on this while we're talking.
And so, Caroline, is the question about, anything in addition to these three topics that we just discussed? Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I would even, if I can jump in and just kind of suggest that it's kind of what's the next step. Like as a first step, some of these work is going to be information sharing. So the tech team can gather this information. What is each jurisdiction's incentives? And we can put that on the table and we can put that on a website. And so we can kind of provide that information to developers, and that is helpful and useful. But kind of the next step, the policy is, okay, if jurisdictions want to look at that and say, does the RHC want to make recommendations like, we recommend all jurisdictions take this step for greater consistency between jurisdictions, then what does that look like? And what is the role of the RHC in pushing that discussion forward so that there's greater alignment between jurisdictions? So I think the easy step is just kind of the information gathering and sharing. But then the question is, what is the role of the RHC want to be in terms of advocating for policies back to jurisdictions so they're in greater alignment with each other?
Well, and I've got a question for you, Carolyn, because you're part of the sea level rise. Yes, you are a part of that now, but I meant to say climate change group, whatever it's called now. And that's kind of one of the functions of that group, right? To come together, share information, and develop policy together and bring it to the individual jurisdictions. Is that a correct?
Somewhat correct.
Somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of evolved more into the electeds now are function as an executive committee, and we do set a work plan, and they're like two major thrusts we agreed on for the year to work on.
Yeah, like one of them being like energy scores at time of sale, kind of a thing. So I'm curious like how that works in that body in terms of developing policy recommendations together, and then each I guess member of that collaborative championing those in their individual jurisdictions. Like what is if it hasn't happened yet in that group, like what's the vision for that happening?
Well, it functions somewhat similarly in that we have a tech team. We also have a citizens advisory work group, and that's changed a little bit too. So I'm trying to get on top of what exists right now. But proposals are made, they're discussed. The work group may bring forth things, for us to chew on. A lot of it has been just trying to get alignment between what the individual jurisdictions are doing. We started out in the early days identifying it was like 74 different actions that jurisdictions could take to reduce their carbon input. And each of the jurisdictions was able to kind of cherry pick, what they wanted to work on, because some of them may have already been doing things that were identified. And so, it doesn't make sense to say, oh, go do this. No, we're already doing that kind of a thing. And then looking at where we could request alignment to get the most collective impact for those actions. And so that work has been done. Now we've identified the built environment is the area that we're going to move the needle. We should be able to move the needle on fastest, while still encouraging electrification of vehicles and infrastructure to support that. So, I don't know. It's very general. I mean, I don't want to get too deep down in the weeds on that, but.
Yeah, well, and I like you mentioning that there's a role for an advisory committee there. So that would be one of my questions for us is like, what are the role of the two advisory committees that we have in terms of involvement in policy, any policy development that we do? And I also, I just jotted down manufactured housing. That's actually kind of a policy issue that we've already initiated. So, we've got 3 items from the fair housing assessment that we've all just agreed that we're all going to work on. There's the manufactured housing stuff. All of this is hopefully going to result in some kind of policy recommendations that each of us, bring into our own jurisdictions and champion.
Yeah, the manufactured housing is one that I very much want to work on together because Tumwater has probably gone further than any of us on being able to protect the parks from being sold for redevelopment into McMansions or what have you. And that is something I think we could share. We've got a couple of large parks in Lacey that are very concerned about foreign investors buying the land and evicting them, and these are older ones that couldn't even physically be moved from the site. They wouldn't survive it, so it's bad. Yeah, so I didn't mean to distract us quite from here we were.
I make a comment,
please?
Yeah, when we had a meeting yesterday, and Michael briefed me and others on this, and Brad can jump in if he wants to. What Michael said was that there's been a feeling over the time that we've been together as an RHC that we respond to things that just come up, and that this idea of policy making means that we as an RHC have policies that we have that we have in our jurisdictions, and that we I don't want to say push, but that are what the RHC also recommends, or it's something that people can count on, that that we have a policy about. And I just wanted to mention to you some of the things when I said, well, like what? Like give me some examples, Michael, of what you'd like to see, modeled in RHC. He said, like, we have a policy on pet shops. We have a policy on bag bans. We have a policy on AUD parking, or and like we talked about just a little while ago, tenant protections. So it's like people have some idea that consistently where the policy is of the RHC, and it's not we just respond to how much money to give or an emergency or something like that. So I just wanted to pass that along. I don't know if it fits in with what exactly you're saying, Carolyn, but just feeling like it gives us some directions. And of course, the environment, like you just were talking, is one. And have those discussions among jurisdictions, so when we get things that come to us, we have some policy around the request or the conversation or the decision we're going to make. So, Brad, do you want to add anything to that from our conversation?
No, Councilmember Kathy, I think you captured that pretty well. I think the discussion we had was, we're looking for some easily explained framework that when the community approaches us on what we're doing and what the RHC is doing, we can say, this is exactly what we're doing. This is the framework we're building from, the policies that we're building from. And as part of that process, these are the particular projects that fulfill those policies. We've had discussions about this in the past, and we've been very good at dealing with emergency situations, but I don't think we've been as strong as we probably should be on developing that broader framework that we can use to explain to the general community, why should I care about the Regional Housing Council?
Thank you, Brad. Well said. Anybody have anything they'd like to add to that?
Or question it,
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say what anybody wants to add to that, or wants to question that, or ask,
right.
I've got a question about that. In terms of like a framework, what what I think of is for what a framework might look like, and we can all respond to this, is maybe well, for one, we've just added some things to our work plan for some policies, but having a process around it where there's information gathering that's done by the tech team, bringing that information to Regional Housing Council and to advisory committees. And as you were saying, it could be one meeting where things are presented on, and then the second meeting where we kind of dig in and we think of what is the unified voice of the Regional Housing Council on this particular policy. And then that's something that not only do we each bring back to our own jurisdictions champion, but it gets put on the RHC website as well. So when you say framework, is like, are you thinking of like just, what that looks like step by step?
Brad used that word.
I was looking at his cube on the screen. Too,
oh, good.
I was wondering why I was feeling a breeze back here.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a couple things that worked here. So first of all, I think there's the policy side, which is sort of the broader overarching goals and objectives of what we're trying to achieve. And then the framework is obviously how we develop that as part of the process. But I think both of those things need to be a little bit more explainable to the public in general about this. Just for background, we had a fairly challenging meeting with Tumwater residents regarding potential changes to our code and homelessness and so forth. And there's an obvious disconnect between what we're trying to do as a city and what some of our community members feel that we should be doing, that I think we need to be paying a little more attention to and being able to explain better what we're doing. And that's kind of what I'm trying to bring us around to do in a little bit better way, I guess, is what my focus is as part of this discussion.
And I think it goes along with how we can speak also about what other jurisdictions are doing, that the RHC is a collaboration of the cities and the towns in Thurston County and the county. It's nice to be able to say, well, this is something that we discussed, and this is one of our policies or one of our directions or one of the things that we would like to see happen each time someone has a question about, one of these areas. So it's kind of making us feel like we're a group together on some of these things. And I like it when you can say it. And we followed this idea that was started in Lacey or in Olympia. It gets people off our back. We send them to.
I apologize, don't interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Another thing I think is important is it's okay to explain our differences through the Regional Housing Council. We have a lot of processes that we work together with other jurisdictions on, whether we're dealing with the climate mitigation strategies or housing action plans or any of the other things that we do. We all don't necessarily follow exactly the same path. We may have similar goals, but we may have different ways of reaching those goals. And I think it's okay as part of this process to acknowledge that and to sort of explain the differences and why things are happening that way. Or if we all are in common agreement, that's even better. But I think both of those things need to be thought about.
Very good. That's it.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Carolyn.
I'd like to hear a little bit from tech team too, because one of the things when we were coming up with our work plan was a little concerned that we weren't overloading the tech team. So I wanted to kind of see if you all feel like this is kind of doing a survey of where we are right now with perhaps a few housing topics that we could look at, like the mobile home, perhaps parks, and then coming back with that.
So you're looking at me.
I
So
sorry, but you're on the spot.
I also think this is a really good discussion. I think part of it as well is kind of the maturing of the RHC itself, right? And entering almost a next phase as far as the collaboration and implementation. And so when I hear a framework, I hear some kind of, in my mind, because I'm a planner, it's a document, it's a plan, it's maybe a strategic plan of the RHC that sets forth like how we all work together, how things get elevated to individual decision-making bodies and those kinds of things. And we've already started to do that work, but what we don't have is kind of the framework of the idea on how that all works together.
Right.
And so, I think that's a fairly put together that plan, if we want to call it that, would be a fairly heavy lift for the tech team to be able to do that. I think that that's something that maybe a consultant or something like that could help us through, because I think there's also ideas about like, well, how does the RHC operate for the, into the near future and then in the long term? I mean, does the RHC become like some of our other regional agencies like LOT or TRPC, where they're their own standalone agency? I think we kind of feeds into that discussion as well. Is this going to be a body that's always going to be supported by its own jurisdictional staff, or should it have its own staff? So I think there's all those things kind of in play in my mind, and something that maybe, I think some outside help at some point, a facilitator of a discussion, somebody that can assemble all this and put it together might be the appropriate place to do that. So it doesn't put the burden on Tom to do it all, for example.
Yeah, I guess to jump in. So one kind of our overarching plan is the 5-year homeless response plan. And that is going to be coming up next year, that our office is responsible, and Keely specifically is going to be taking the lead on developing. So that's in the ILA as kind of the North Star for the RHC, is that 5-year homeless response plan. So that's kind of will be developed again, kind of going forward. We're waiting for guidance from Commerce on what that needs to look like. I think there's potential for a companion piece a little bit that's maybe a little bit more of an affordable housing strategy. The homeless response plan touches on that, but not in quite as much depth. So there may be something around an affordable housing strategy potentially. But I think the 5-year plan in a lot of ways has been the driving plan for the RHC and for us to. So I think that could be going forward. But
I think I'm not a planner, more practitioner. So like shorter term, to speak to your comment about capacity and us moving forward, I think it's a little bit on my previous comment on like finding a process in this to say, okay, tech team has brought all of these affordable housing strategies to the RHC, then asking the electeds to go back to the jurisdictions and say, what is reasonably going to be moved forward? What is digestible to everyone right now? And then coming back at that next meeting and say, here are the 3 things that all of us are curious about. We want to look at incentives, the LOT program for hookup fees. We want to look at the MFTE. Here are the 3 things or common things that all of us felt we were ready for. And then the tech team can move those forward. And that seems like the most efficient way for us to be able to do that. But if we go down all of this work to do all of this, and then 3 of the jurisdictions are like, oh, we're not ready to adopt that, our council isn't there, we're not that far along, then that's just a lot of us spinning our wheels to not have an end product. And so I think finding ways to say, we present it, we have this matrix, we have this framework, and then there's been behind the scenes work to say that all of us are ready for these things. That's going to lighten our load and be able to share a lot of the work that some jurisdictions have done.
And just to piggyback on that, if I can, is some of that work doesn't come back to the tech team, right? Because all the jurisdictions have planning commissions, and if we're going to start looking at codes and those kind of things, that's not tech team work. So it's kind of some of that work, but then whether that can be directed in planning commissioners or whatever appropriate other kind of boards and commissions that jurisdictions have that work on the technical issues, would need to take those.
Yeah, which should be even better and expand our footprint, and it would expand our reach on how we're able to standardize our work around affordable housing homelessness.
This made me think of like, what are all our planning commissions working on right now? Comprehensive plan updates, and there's a housing element to that. So that it makes me wonder what kind of connections can be made, knowing that each of us are going to be bringing a housing element chapter through our planning commissions and councils. Are there pieces of that we should all be talking about before those processes complete, so that our comprehensive plans have some alignment to them?
We're all using the same consultant for the displacement study and using TRPC for our affordable housing units throughout our jurisdictions. So that work is all being done cross jurisdictionally.
Which is a good model.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody have other thoughts on this?
I think these are all great ideas, and getting back to Brett's point, I think at some point we need to write something down, right? I think that's
Yeah.
where we need to then take the next step to establish kind of like, how do we work together regionally to advance these things? If first something happens in Tumwater and they say, well, what's the regional priority? They've got something to stand by versus, saying, being a little left hanging in the wind.
Yeah, I was hoping we wouldn't have to grab through a bowl of jello on this, but maybe come up with a topic and then have the tech team come back and say, well, this is what we would need to do this, and let that start as the germ of a framework rather than survey everything and all that kind of thing. So does that make sense?
So what would that piece be then? Would it be mobile manufacturing parks, or is that kind of the level that you're thinking? Is that the thing that starts it all, or is it something else?
That's the one I have in mind, but someone's over here, so I'd like to hear from our other housing council members what their thoughts are. Emily, are you there?
I'm here.
Any thoughts on?
No, just listening, taking lots of notes, and kind of trying to think through like what this might look like. But I don't have any thoughts to share right now.
Joan? Joan?
Yes, yes. I was trying to get unmuted there. I don't know, maybe we should select something out of what we talked about earlier today, or that we've talked about in the past, and talk it through in policy language, or how does that impact what we're doing? Yeah. Different things go on in Tumwater that go on other places, and it has to do with all kinds of things. But I've never heard us, like you mentioned, our mobile home parks and how we worked on that for a number of years, and then went to court with it and so forth. Might be an interesting thing if we're going to build some kind of policy that people could, play off of, or do the work in their jurisdiction by that. Maybe Tumwater should do a presentation on that. Maybe there's something that's been done in different jurisdictions that we would like to share with one another that could help us get started on something like this. I don't know. It just came to my mind when one of you mentioned us being down the road a bit on the mobile home park thing. It's a story of a web, and it would help other jurisdictions not get caught in the same places that we did, and then come out the other side. So anyway, I'm just thinking of us, sharing among ourselves, if we want to work together as jurisdictions and plan, ahead according to some experience that others have had. Maybe we ought to talk about that more often under that kind of a rubric in our meetings. I don't know. Just came to my mind.
Thank you. Trevor, you've been pretty quiet. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I was just kind of thinking, whichever direction we end up going, I just want to make sure that we don't put any undue pressures on, let's say, like local businesses, and we don't become too policy heavy. Keep kind of the communities and businesses and all the people involved in our communities in mind, because I know sometimes, especially in the state of Washington, we can get a little policy heavy and a little government heavy. So just want to bear that in mind as we move forward with our recommendations.
Thank you. Gary?
Hey, so I've been thinking about this for a while as well, because Yelm is probably the most dissimilar in terms of the issues that we are wrestling with. From the standpoint of homelessness, we don't have the same level of problem right now. According to the city administrator, I think the last point in count, we had about 50 homeless people, which is not insubstantial, but I think for us, what I would like to try to focus on as an essential component of work going forward is more like preventative healthcare maintenance. In other words, how do we prevent Yelm from having that problems in the future with homelessness? And I mean, like the anti-displacement study is a great example that I think we can really benefit from. But I guess I would just like to keep in mind that, you know, we have a certain kind of, in some ways, it's almost more important for us to be participating in the RHC because we have an opportunity to avoid, you know, mistakes that were certainly probably not foreseeable, but you know, there's a lot more knowledge now about what causes homelessness and the you know, the mechanisms that are out there that, for example, purchasing manufactured home parks, etc. But I just, for me, it's important that Yelm be kept in the mix from that standpoint. We're not going to be able to participate in building, other than participating in the RHC. I mean, right now, we don't see ourselves building tiny home communities and things like that because there's just, that's not the overwhelming need. But again, just sort of, I'm thinking of it in terms of healthcare. You got a problem, you know, you go to the doctor, but you also like exercise and you eat well so that you don't have to go to the doctor. And that's kind of where I hope to put Yelm.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just would be remiss not to mention that we do have a lived experience housing steering committee whose purpose is to help inform policies and hopefully they'll be really centered in the conversation about developing the new 5-year plan, as well as members on our advisory board that have lived experience. So that is, I don't like to think of people as resources, but that is like really valuable feedback and input from that group of individuals that we absolutely don't want to forget about when we're talking about developing these policies.
I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but was somebody trying to say anything virtually or with?
I think someone forgot to mute.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, it'd be good to hear maybe in our next meeting, if it's possible, kind of a little update on where the lived experience committee is and what they're working on, because I haven't heard anything about it for quite some time.
Yeah, they've been in the transition, like onboarding new members. And so they're still kind of in that process of getting situated again.
Okay.
And our vice chair of the Homeless Services Advisory Board also is facilitating, one of the facilitators of that meeting. So we have like 3 representatives on the homeless advisory board. And also I would say that when I first started in 2019, Gary, I just remember thinking it's not an issue until it is. And now we have a homeless response, like it's not an issue for any single jurisdiction until it is. So I think that I like the idea of considering preventative measures, and also like no one is immune in the United States right now from experiencing an influx of people experiencing homelessness, especially with rents on the rise and all of the rental survey that Elisa put together, and just looking into our future. I don't think we've begun to see someone called the tsunami of houselessness back in 2020 that was predicted. I don't think that we've actually started to see it yet. And more people, just speaking to providers out that serve in Yelm, that they're noticing a huge influx of people living in their cars and vehicles. So they don't have a lot of there's not a lot of visible, like tented, unhoused, unsheltered homelessness, but a huge rise in people living in their vehicles. So I mean, and that's a whole, we still haven't figured out what to do with that anywhere. Besides kind of move them along, but that's still a big issue in our community, especially with such a significant increase in from OSPI data around families experiencing homelessness in our county. Based on their data, they're living in their vehicles, so they're doubled up. And we gotta, that's a whole nother issue. So there are more than we think. There's a lot of homelessness is invisible.
Okay, well, how,
I don't know if this is the right place for this comment, but just a thought came to mind, so I'll throw it out there. Correct me. I love this idea of the lived experience. I think it's fantastic that we have that so far supporting our homelessness efforts. As the regional housing committee, you know, some other things come to mind for me, which is all of the other people who aren't suffering homelessness, but families where mom and dad are both working tirelessly, second jobs, trying to get their kids to school and get to work on time, and still not afford housing, right? Or get another rent increase notice and have to figure out yet again where to move, how to come up with the funds to move. And so I just want to be very cautious that as this body, as we move forward, that you know, perhaps maybe we create an avenue for hearing those voices as well, right? Because that's also a segment of our communities collectively that are very much struggling. And I think sometimes we have a lot to deal with homelessness. Persons like myself will likely never own a home, not here, not in this community that I love to serve, right? So I think there's a lot more voices that we should consider when we are talking about lived experience, because I think that term can apply to those who are suffering through or trying to maneuver through, you know, just as many red tapes as there are in their situation as there are in, you know, homeless person situations as well. So that was it, just general comment.
okay. It's like Emily has her hand. Emily?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a lot of availability or like opportunities available for folks experiencing housing insecurity as well, right? On these advisory committees, it's not just folks with lived experience in homelessness, but also people who are currently or have been housing insecure. Am I mistaken, or is that a component of some of these advisory committees that we have?
Yes, on the affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
And also put in a plug, we're just about to hire, we're in the process of hiring, onboarding someone in our office who is going to be a kind of a rent assistance specialist, but one of their focuses is going to be on those unstably housed kind of populations and what kind of support. So we're bringing on a staff member specifically focused on that population.
Okay.
So I'm hearing a few things here. I'm hearing a desire for like a written framework for how we approach policy issues, and recognizing that will take some effort that that there might not be capacity for to like pull together that framework. But we also have some policy issues we plan to work on this year. You know, the three that we talked about with the assessment of fair housing and then manufactured housing. So I'm wondering if we can't use these for just kind of like test cases as how we do policy as the RHC. And with each of these, you know, we think about it from that lens, like how do these inform a framework that we want to build and develop as we're working on them. And for each one, do an after action review, like how successful was this? Did we get, you know, did we influence, you know, decisions at the jurisdictions by making recommendations as a regional housing council? And also, you know, we have these ones that we've already identified. I'd also think it would be a really good idea to ask our three advisory committees what their top issues are that they would like to see us working on for policy. And, you know, recognizing that there's a pretty full plate this year, but we have some things to work on, but that can inform what we work on in the next work plan. So just trying to reflect back some things I'm hearing, and then we can go through the motions of this of the policy work, and think about how that informs a framework. Maybe in 2025, we do like a mini retreat where we do bring on some outside help and we debrief all of these things that we worked on together, and we start putting pen to paper on like what that system looks like.
Good thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Well, anybody have anything they want to add to what Danny just said? Does that feel like the direction we want to go? Emily?
Could you repeat the 3 priorities that we're discussing right now? I heard the manufactured homes, but I wasn't clear on what the other 2 were that we're focusing on right now.
Yeah, so with the fair housing assessment, we talked about inventorying each jurisdiction's incentives for affordable housing and looking for areas of alignment, reviewing of best practices for addressing mold, and then also inventorying each jurisdiction's tenant protections. And then in addition to that, we've already had manufactured housing on our work plan. So it's actually 4 topics that we've already got in front of us to work on this year.
I don't know if the manufactured home park subcommittee's already met once and is up and running. We just didn't have anything to report, so that's underway.
Yes.
Okay, and just to clarify, Danny, what you're mentioning is maybe using these as like the 3 starting points for what the RHC kind of uses as a discussion for like what we want to focus on collaboratively between jurisdictions, and then seeing how that goes, and then maybe adding more priorities next year.
Yeah, seeing how it goes and also being intentional about how did that work? What can we do better next time? And start to work towards having this established framework that that we can have written down.
Okay, I like that idea a lot. And I'm also wondering if maybe like, because there are so many people here and we have so many valuable voices at the table through RHC, like maybe we could take this back and kind of think on it a little bit as far as like the topics we want to explore, and potentially do some sort of like survey or index of interests, and then come back at the next meeting and talk through what people said was important to them. I don't know, just to maybe kind of get some more ideas generated. Or is there like, are people leaning more towards focusing on these priorities mentioned now just so that we can get the ball rolling? Or would there be interest in kind of discussing additional priorities that might come up between now and our next meeting?
Well, one of the things I also suggested is that we reach out to our advisory committees, so the Lived Experience Advisory Committee, Homeless Services, and Affordable Housing, and ask them what kind of priorities they have that we don't have in front of us right now. But I think also each of us could think on this a bit and about what we would like to elevate. I think we might want to be cautious in terms of like piling on more than we can really handle in a year. But I think that's a very, very good point. Like we're having this policy discussion now. We've got some things in front of us. We don't want to, we don't want to limit ourselves needlessly, but be thoughtful about it.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you.
Joan?
I just wanted to ask a question since all these experts are here. Do we were talking about people living in their cars, which is a nationwide thing. I read a long article about it just recently, a feature article, and I may have saved that. And they used Washington as an example of people living in their cars and how they handle that. And they mentioned a variety of different lots, like churches or places where people who are living in their cars can go at night and sleep and feel safe, and then they have to leave in the morning. The places where they park don't provide, anyway, the ones in the article, they didn't provide, services like bathrooms and showers and things like that. The folks found other ways to do that. But do we have anything like that where people can park?
Nope. Not short and sweet. Nope.
So we add safe parking to the list of policies.
Yeah, well, we talked about people living in cars and such a big thing and getting kicked off the streets. And then I read this article and I thought, wow, these folks are.
I can share anecdotally that I know someone specifically who is from the
Rainier Yelm area has a teen at Yelm High School who lives with the grandparents now, and the mother drives to Lakewood at night to sleep in her car. So we have community members who are not finding what they need here.
Well. Well, thanks for that. It's discouraging answer, but I'm glad I got the, I'm glad I got.
Alrighty. Well, I guess to be continued, there's a lot to think about here, but I'm glad we're at least taking up the issue of policy and sharing and prioritizing that. So thank you all for a good discussion there. Next on the agenda is communications update, but Elisa said she doesn't think she needs to do that. Is that right? Still?
I don't have anything today.
Still no update. Okay. So now it's going to be order. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share, report out, raise questions about? Good news, bad news?
I can share that in a couple of weeks, March 19th, we're going to be doing a public hearing at the City of Olympia around tenant protections. We have a few things that are tie-ins to our rental housing registry and a couple of things we need to address with some of the policies we've passed previously. And we've also did another look at what is happening in other jurisdictions and what we might like to consider. If anybody's interested, I could send out, it's kind of it's a lot to go through in an update like this, but I'd be happy to send out what we're interested, what we're looking at and what will be a part of our hearing if folks are interested in that.
Very much so. I mean,
yeah,
tenant protections is exactly the thing that, cross-jurisdictional thing we should be looking at. So
right, I can just send it out to the whole RHC so you guys can have that on your radar. Hear it from us before the jolt.
Oh, God.
Isn't it always the first thing in the box?
Alright.
I get filtered.
I'll give a Desmond Drive encampment update. I think the
Okay.
council heard some news last night on that. Not sure if everybody else is aware. So go back a little bit, just as a reminder, the RHC sent out the letters to state agencies. The state agencies finally had responded with allowing kind of two lists, I guess, if you will. There's the by names list that has been had been established by the Lacey CRU Mott team, and then a second list established by OnlyMap to get people essentially a combined list into Maple Court. As of today, there are, my understanding is there's 12 people, there's 5 people on the Lacey list, there's 7 people on the DES list, all with spaces available in Maple Court. So those rooms are available, ready for people to move in. In starting to trying to move people in, there was a temporary restraining order motion put in by the attorney that represents a portion of those clients, and that was to be heard in district court in Tacoma a couple weeks ago. Prior to that, the parties were given some additional time. So the city of Lacey is a part of this, as well as DES, Department of Commerce, and maybe some other state agencies. We're given some additional time to kind of work out some details. So there was additional 2 weeks timeline given to be able to establish some framework for getting people into court and those kinds of things. So that was to be the temporary restraining order was to be decided on Monday. On Monday, they met again and provided another 2-week extension. So at this point, the date for getting those people into Maple Court, kind of the due date, if you will, is March 11th. At this point, there's been an agreement that's been signed that basically says if they're still there after March 11th, they take the risk that they could be trespassed and removed from the site as they would have been before. So at this point, that gives us essentially another 2 weeks to try to get all those people into Maple Court. Good news, we've got my understanding is two people, one from the Lacey list, one from the OnlyMap list going in tomorrow, is my understanding. So those offers of housing are being accepted slowly but surely. So hopefully by the time this 2 weeks is up, we'll have those people in the Maple Court. If not, then that will probably go back to the court.
Couple of things posted. Or
Yeah. So there is some basically good faith attempts, working in good faith to try to get people into either Franz Anderson, New Hope, or Drexel House, I think those are kind of the other options. So there could be some additional timelines, some additional extensions to give people the ability to get put into some other places outside of Maple Court. But that's at this point, I'm not exactly sure the status of any availability at any of those facilities or anything like that.
okay. Anybody have questions for Ryan about that? Okay.
Emily.
Oh, Emily does. Okay.
Yeah.
Right before.
So those people between those two lists, does that exclude anyone else who's left on the property? Do we know if there are any folks out there who are not for any reason on one of those two lists?
I'm not the right person to be able to answer that. I don't know. I'd have to refer to our CRU team that's out on the site.
Probably also OLIMAP.
Yeah, we're rolling out.
OLIMAP would know.
Okay, I mean, I'll follow up with OLIMAP on that. Is there any plan in place for folks who might not be on one of those two lists? Or are they just kind of part of that, you're at risk of being trespassed and that's the end of story?
I don't think I can answer that. Sorry.
Okay, I mean, I think it's an important discussion to have. We are at the RHC meeting and we're discussing Desmond. And if there are people who are excluded from those lists, I think it's an important discussion for us to have before the March 11th date comes up.
Commissioner Klaus, I do believe, so Darian, myself, and Noha Magu did speak, and I think, and Ty Gundel, right, from OLIMAP. And I think the intent was behind the two lists that would cover anyone who would be staying at Desmond, that those two lists. So I believe that the intent and the spirit of all of this is that anyone who was at Desmond is accounted for in those lists. At least that's what the intent was. So we can follow up and see if that's
okay.
what's
Yeah.
what.
Okay, thank you.
Point in time, we're saying, okay, these are all the people we can gather up. These are the ones who are willing to be on the list. And then the list become closed at that point.
I wasn't involved in any of the ongoing conversations, but as far as we understood and what we had heard from the governor's office is that some of the people that were originally staying at Desmond had already moved to the jungle. So what we had discussed with the governor's office was OLIMAP can go find those 3 people that had moved from Desmond that are now living in the jungle and say, you're on this list. So that means there's a little bit more give with that list than there is with the crew list, as I understand. Yeah.
But it's not like somebody could come in from Tacoma and say, I'm a resident of Desmond and get on the list.
No, it was very specific.
Right.
Yeah.
So that window is closed now except for the people you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer, Emily? I mean,
Yeah, that answer, I mean, kind of. I'll follow up with OLIMAP just to, talk through this a little bit more. Because, I mean, Keely, I appreciate your input. I know the intent was to make sure everyone was included. I just know this has been a really messy process. The communication there's been a lot of lapses in communication with so many parties involved. And I'm in touch on a daily basis with folks who are doing outreach there every single day. And I'm just hearing a lot of mixed information and confusion amongst the people who are at the camp, and a lot of panic and anxiety, and to be frank, trauma that has happened as a result of this. And I feel like as leaders of the community, it's our responsibility to ensure that there's continuity of communication, and it impacts them in major ways. So I just want to make sure that I'm able to share with the outreach folks I'm in communication with what the real answers are so that they can ensure they're giving factual information to the people who are out there. And I just don't want anyone to fall through the cracks, especially with how much hard work has gone into this on behalf of all of the leaders here today or at, with other entities who have been working on this. It's just been a lot of effort. So I would really love to see at the end of the day, nobody falling through the cracks on either of those lists or being forcibly removed from the property and having to endure even more trauma than what they've already gone through these last few weeks. So thank you.
Joan, is that a new hand raise?
I just had a comment for Emily. I think checking with OLIMAP is a good idea. They just gave a great report to us. I'm on the ORCA board, Olympic Regional Clean Air Agency. And, we've been working with them too, with the fires and all of that kind of thing. And they gave a report and they talked at length about some of this. So there's, and some of that would also probably be in the minutes of the ORCA too. So, yeah, it was a little bit heartbreaking and frustrating for a number of people. So I encourage you to check in with OLIMAP. They're way up on all of this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Okay. Anybody else have something for the good of the order? Kaylee?
Just really quickly, as Tom mentioned, I just met with Department of Commerce staff yesterday for the Associated County Human Services Homelessness and Affordable Housing Work Group that I co-chair with Sam Jackal from Walla Walla. We will be presenting next week on Commerce will be bringing conversation around the draft guidance, draft local guidance, and the draft state strategic plan. Those will be having the initial discussion. Those drafts should be out in April for comment and discussion, and with a launch of the local guidance in September. So we're definitely planning now and having preemptive conversations, but just to give a kind of a really broad timeline of when this all begins, we have until basically the end of 2025 to have it finished. So just some 5-year plan updates.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody in, what am I trying to say? In Zoom land? Okay. Anybody else in the room? All right. One thing I'd like to request, Keely, at your convenience, no urgency, but we haven't heard much about the Built for Zero program for quite some time, and I'd like to get caught up on where that is and what it's doing.
Sure. We have a Built for Zero coordinator right there on the screen.
Okay. All right.
So Kevin and I we'll chat and we'll come up with something for the next meeting. But yeah, then we've had some exciting developments, right, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. As a community, our community has put in a lot of work over the last 4 years. It's really starting to show. I'm really proud of everyone involved in our homeless crisis response system for that.
You can pay me later for bringing that one up. Okay. All righty. Does anybody else have anything for good of the order? All right. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, March 27th, 2024, back here in this room at City Hall. And I hope that this worked out for everybody, this location, and the room is kind of right sized for our group. So it's just so far. But you can work for free.
I love that sass.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, yes, and there's a bus stop right at.
Yeah, I had to take like 2 buses.
But it's free. All righty, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.